Okay. The minutes were approved, and then we can move on to our next items. Ed is going to take the minutes for this meeting. Thanks to Putnam Kidder for assisting us in setting up the meeting and the AV capabilities. We have several guests tonight. I want to welcome Paul LaRocque and Greg Russica from Bonin Associates. Thanks for joining us this evening. And Mike Ryan from the New London Inn is also joining us. He participated in our neighbors meeting about the Pocket Park and has shown some interest in becoming involved in our committee. So thanks again for everyone. Couple of housekeeping items. The first is that our next scheduled meeting is February 18th. Unfortunately, I'm going to be out of town, so I wanted to request to the committee, would they consider meeting 1 week before the 12th of February at 5:30? If you could check your calendars. It will be at 5:30 because there's a meeting in this room until 5 o'clock. And the second item is the Board of Selectmen meeting on the 18th is a very important one for us because the Board of Selectmen will be reviewing the pocket plan proposal. Bonin Architects will give a presentation, and I will also share some remarks. Who from the committee can be at that Board of Selectmen meeting on the 18th at 5 o'clock, I believe, in this room? Don, Ed? That's February? No, that's December 18th, next week. Yeah. Judy's not available? Grant? Yeah. Oh, okay. So thank you so much, Grant, Don, and Ed, and maybe some other committee members will be in attendance. We will be requesting from the Board of Selectmen approval for a proposed parcel at 328 Main Street to be used as a pocket park. And we've had a lot of communication since our last meeting regarding this particular item because Paul and Greg have other obligations this evening. We're going to sort of tee them up sooner on the agenda than that might be reflected on the agenda that you received. But before I turn it over to them, I'll just basically review for committee members and other attendees sort of what has been the sequence of events so far relative to the Pocket Park. And I have had a number of conversations with Greg and Paul, as well as other members of Bonin Architects, and they have very generously agreed to provide pro bono services for the design phase of the Pocket Park, which is really extraordinary and deeply appreciated. On October 31st and December 4th, several committee members and myself met with Adam Ricker, the town planner, Sam Clark, the Director of Public Works, and Ashley Siebold, the town administrator, to address any concerns that they may have on the basic park design, the utilization and maintenance of the proposed park. The second meeting included Greg and Paul, in which they provided schematic diagrams that you'll see this evening, and several recommendations or suggestions that were made by Adam and Sam were incorporated into the design. Both of these meetings had committee representatives in attendance. On November 21st, I met with Greg and Paul to further refine the park design, and that was a Zoom meeting. There were two other committee members in attendance. And then on December 5th, we conducted a meeting with 5 representatives who were neighbors or abutters to the proposed park. They were composed of organizations and businesses, and minutes were taken by Bonin Architects for that meeting. and 2 conceptual drawings that you'll see this evening were presented. Representatives from Bar Harbor Bank and the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Chamber of Commerce were not in attendance, but in separate conversations, they expressed support for the project. Separate conversations with me. In the course of those meetings, particularly the meeting with the neighbors, there were 3 kind of constituencies that were identified in terms of possible uses of the park. One was the frequent downtown recreational walkers, which obviously we're reaching out to in terms of the Walkable New London initiative, casual strollers and visitors in the downtown area, and families, particularly with preschool children, because of the library programming and the strawberry blossoms Montessori school that's going to be constructed. And I know several people were in attendance at the neighbors meeting, so I just wanted to ask if you had anything to add. Mike, I don't know if you were in attendance. If you have anything to add, it would be appreciated. Oh, hi, Woody. Thanks for joining us. I know you have another obligation tonight, but thank you for coming. Just for the minutes, Woody Kennedy, committee member, just joined us. So I think that what I would say about the neighbors meeting is it was very engaging, very high level of interest. Really saw this as kind of a cornerstone for downtown passive recreational activity. There was a lot of discussion, questions, and Greg and Paul can speak to this, but some of the things that some of the concerns or suggestions they made will be incorporated into the ongoing planning for the park. So I just want to make it clear that these schematic diagrams that are being presented tonight are really in their draft form, that we will be doing ongoing community outreach and fundraising in 2026, which will include community forums via Zoom or sort of live in person. So we're at the beginning stages of sort of an evolutionary process. I just want to underline that. And unless there are any other questions at this time, I'll turn it over to Greg and Paul. Do we have any other questions? Okay, thanks so much. Be sure to put your mics on. Yeah.
Thanks for having us. You guys hear me all right? Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to kind of recap what we've done so far, kind of what our process has been, how we got to the designs we've got to. About half of you in this room have probably already heard this spiel, so I'll try to make it somewhat fast, and then I'll leave more time for discussion. So process so far, when Bowen Architects was approached about the project, kind of our first step was to take inventory and analysis of the existing park, which consisted of a site visit where Paul and I and Ella from our office visited the park, talked about what the positive and negative aspects of the park are, and how we could incorporate the kind of program we were tasked with into this park. Kind of from that inventory and analysis, we kind of generated some big picture design ideas that kind of governed our, sketching and doodling, we'll call it, so far. Those were to create interest at the street level. Seems like a critical piece of design infrastructure here. to create, a sense of space and identity for the park, so that it's users know it's a unique space. To draw people in, I've kind of noted to several of you before, I've been working in New London for like 15 years and had never really walked through this park. So it kind of tells you the level of use that it's getting. We also wanted to be good neighbors, so taking into account the ways that abutters use the park now, the impacts on Woodcrest, the barn playhouse housing, the inn, the library, and just municipal parking in general. We wanted to have different and unique uses compared to the town green. The town green's a large, expansive, open green space suited for many things. We wanted these spaces to be more intimate and different use. We want to be mindful of maintenance and the impact on the town. Include resilient design where we can, and we wanted to have inclusive design. Russ talked about kind of those three groups of primary users we envision, and we wanted to have something for all of them. We've been through a few different iterations of the plan so far. You're looking at our kind of first effort, which you'll see creates that interest at the street by expanding the sidewalk, changing up the paving, creating a picnic area and entrance in that kind of upper right-hand corner, and then having a plaza for biking and signage. That's really at kind of the heart of this project, is to link this park as a hub to our the walkable New London initiatives. So having wayfinding up front at the street level that catches the eye of the casual visitor. As a way to draw people into the park, having some type of structure and pathway system within the park will help lead people into it, as opposed to passing by. We also kind of were tasked, with program elements, having a space for families and spaces for quiet reflection. So our family spaces tended to be in kind of that lower corner of the park, basically on the principle that is the furthest from traffic that you could be. So the best place for having children running around and safety, that seemed like the best place. From this initial design, we had gotten some feedback from, we'll say, select people in the committee. We developed a second similar design, which you see has a lot of the same elements to it. That big brick streetscape, the plaza out front, a picnic area. This one's configured a little bit differently. Pathway, again, configured a little bit differently. We still had an arbor. However, this one was a pass through instead of pass in front of. And then family area. this version showed no play structure as that kind of first one did. We have spoken several times that a play structure could be something that's phased, right? That doesn't need to be there at the very beginning. It's not, we'll say, critical to the design of the park. So these two plans we have shared with Adam and Sam from the town. Gotten some pretty positive feedback, I'd say, from them. And these were also shared at our neighbors meeting, which spurred a lot of great dialogue, I think, in understanding what they would be looking for in this park. From there, based on the feedback we got at that neighbors meeting, we did another kind of quick version that took kind of the best elements from both of those first two renditions and incorporated it into this third. Primarily being the configuration of the picnic area, the quiet garden, the arbor, and then this rendition. One of the feedbacks we got from the representatives from Woodcrest was that they could see the residents really wanting to walk a loop through here. So we included a pathway that could connect more directly to Woodcrest and be kind of managed by gate or signage. And that kind of brings us to where we are tonight. I don't know if we had any specific goals or things you want to ask us about, but
Just for clarification, this third iteration, is this the first time we've had conversation about that?
correct.
In other words, there hasn't been sort of committee input or review of that third iteration, but I think that that is an attempt at a culmination of some of the most advantageous aspects of the first two renditions, and also feedback from the neighbors meeting. So, I mean, it's refreshing to see that perspective. I mean, I just want to emphasize to everyone in this room the significance of this project, which seems like it's on a small scale. But many of you probably know our town kind of evolved around Main Street it was a state road, and sort of, buildings cropped up along a state road. We didn't sort of have right from the beginning this sort of vision of a town center and sort of build out. We sort of like, organically built along the road, and that this is really the town's first attempt, to my knowledge, of like streetscape planning, sort of planning on a human scale and sort of incorporating the needs of residents who are going to be walking and biking. So I think it's really significant. We see this as a model project, but we don't see this as the beginning and the end of streetscape planning. And it actually generated a lot of conversation. I mean, that Adam and Sam were very engaged in the conversation around these schematics, and even talked about a much kind of overarching and larger approach where we would have some sort of consistent branding through town in terms of signage, that we'd have, more sophisticated kind of way stations and directional signs for people, and some of the challenges that Public Works faces, because many of the buildings come right up to the sidewalk, or very close to the street. So there is not an easy remedy to making Main Street multimodal, like in terms of various types of transportation. But it really opened up, I thought, refreshing and kind of invigorating dialogue with them of like, oh, where do we want the town to be in 15 years? So, I mean, I think that's the power. I think that's the persuasive aspect of a small-scale project, that it can sort of open up much larger and broader conversations about, who utilizes our downtown area, who sort of benefits from its current infrastructure, and who are people who are marginalized. I use the word marginalized in the sense of, and residents have brought this up. If you're in Woodcrest and you're on a walker and you're trying to get to the library in December, I think you're probably a marginalized, user. And I don't think that's intentional or malicious on anyone's part, but that's sort of the objective reality of our infrastructure at this time. But I do want to open up for questions regarding both the process and the schematic diagrams. Thank you.
I really like it. I like the third rendition. It seems to really complement the businesses in town and certainly the Main Street and access to a space where kids can be safe and play off the main road, which I think is great. Another thing, it sounds like preschool kids or elementary school kids could be one of the main users based off what your concept is. Is there space in the park where we could add like a living kind of place where they can highlight schoolwork or like art projects or something like that, where the kids could be engaged? They could say, hey, look, Mom and Dad, this is in the park, we did this art project, come down and check it out. Maybe there's just some type of living, and it doesn't have to all be art projects, but things that kids might be engaged with in town. Maybe the Cub Scouts put a display on 1 month of the year where they can highlight their projects. There's a lot of youth programs. The Outing Club could post something. The rec department could post something where there's updates and exciting things about activities in town. Maybe that's not part of the plan, but or if it was discussed, I'm not sure. But
Yeah, I'd say absolutely there's opportunity to do that. And while that probably isn't revealed at this level of detail, we did touch on kind of something similar during the neighbors meeting. We had talked about potentially having story walks for the library program. Liz from the Montessori school was very interested in having some type of natural play structures, or didn't need to be something huge, but stuff for kids to climb on and run around. I think there's plenty of opportunity to have art installations throughout. A lot of these kind of spaces we have are somewhat unprogrammed, right? Like we have an arbor shown, but what that arbor really isn't really defined yet. It could be a display board where we could have art, or it could be, we talked about, it could be a living wall or some type of garden. I think there's also opportunity at like that quiet garden where, we're showing like a planter in the middle, but that planter could be, some other type of, could be a sculpture or something else like that. So I think there's definitely opportunity for those kinds of things.
Richard from the library, it conveyed that the youth programs at the library are very interested in utilizing this green space in terms of their storybook hours, where they can have sort of temporary placards up that focus on a particular theme. That would be changeable, but also there might be other opportunities for, you know, placards at their eye level. That could have, like, you know, it could be an art contest to the opening of the park. I mean, I think that that's something that drew a lot of interest at the neighbors meeting, you know, how we would want displays changeable and adaptable to different people's interests and needs. That was even the case, and I don't think Greg touched on this, but that was even the case with the signage in the front, where if it's the Walkable New London Initiative, we can have some digital signs that convey information or news, you know, like something's happening at Colby Sawyer College or something like that. And I think that those kind of displays are already in Lebanon at the town square, some of those digital displays. So I think the point you're making is a really important one, which is ensure that there is flexibility and adaptability in a space that's this defined and this intimate, so that we can optimize possible uses for it. Thank you. I'd like to hear some more comments.
This is not a comment on any particular form. I mean, I like very much what I see, but what I particularly love is the process, Russ. It's been, you know, months now. The input, actually, I miss the meetings, but as you describe it in the previous discussions, there's accumulation taking place that I think is very good for the community. So that process that we're going through is beneficial, as well as whatever the particular outcome is. So really appreciate it.
One of the, and I want to ensure that if there's anyone in the room that wants to, you know, provide additional feedback on these schematic drawings, either in this forum or, you know, speak to me personally, you have the opportunity to do that. And all the materials are posted on our town website for each meeting. So one concern which was conveyed by one of the Board of Selectmen, but also Judy mentioned earlier, is, you know, what are the maintenance considerations for the park? What are the maintenance ramifications for the park? You know, we sort of envision this as a 3-season park, i.e. we're not going to do sort of winter maintenance, at least initially. But at this juncture, Sam Clark conveyed to us that in the current staffing configuration of the Department of Public Works, it would be difficult for them to maintain this park in sort of tip-top condition, because we're talking about, you know, special horticultural plants, you know, kind of intimate spaces that require more, I would say, a finer or granular level of maintenance than the Village Green, which, you know, you get the big mower out. So one of the approaches that we were considering in the fundraising is to create a maintenance fund. You know, I'm just making this up, but let's say we had a maintenance fund of $15,000. And that seemed to address Sam's immediate concerns, i.e. we could use the maintenance fund to contract out landscaping services, and maybe a private landscaper would, you know, give us a bargain price or something to do this for the town. But the question that I haven't been able to answer, but maybe someone in this room can answer, is, you know, are there any ongoing obligation that the town is accepting by converting this to a park? So if I can give you the land conservation model, you know, when someone creates a conservation easement or gives land for conservation, it's in perpetuity, and it's the responsibility of the land trust to ensure that there's no encroachment, you know, there's no trash, there's no violations of the conservation easement. the only reason I'm using that example is, it would be hard for us to predict, what possible problems could arise in the park. So one of the things that Richard mentioned was, unfortunately, when the city of Manchester started breaking up the homeless encampments there were 3 individuals that actually started occupying areas around the library, at odd hours and things like that. And I think that was addressed through social services, but I'm just saying we have to think about every possible outcome in the planning. We could, it's getting real late, but we could have a warrant article which says that we're going to allocate from the city operating, the town operating budget, a half-time position in Public Works to, deal with not just this park, but sort of, downtown areas that require special attention. Let's leave it at that. So I don't know, I'm interested in what Greg and Paul have to say about this, but I'm interested in what other people have to say about this, which is we need, I think, a maintenance plan that is realistic in terms of the cost and is oriented towards projecting into the future, what the needs might be. Because I think in order to get approval from the Board of Selectmen, we have to have they might have to have a very high level of confidence that this isn't going to fall back on the Department of Public Works, because our volunteer landscaping efforts or, a contract with an individual landscape firm, becomes unworkable for whatever reason. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I think that that the Board of Selectmen want to have confidence that, one, no taxpayer money is being used for the installation or the ongoing maintenance of the project. And I'm just trying to figure out how to provide that level of confidence for them.
I'm not sure the timeline, but anticipating that maybe the garden club could be part of the maintenance of the landscaping. One of the sort of philanthropic organizations might take part in doing like a story walk, kiosks and things. Do we ask them before we get permission from the selectmen to tentatively?
Are you talking about approaching the garden club specifically?
Yeah. Anybody that we might, without a commitment on their part, can we brainstorm some organizations that might fill some of the maintenance needs? And then with that kind of possibly reaching out to those organizations, including like the Boy Scouts, including, any organization or any group that we can think of who might have expertise or interest in maintaining a community space.
Yeah.
Do we do that before? And
Well,
say this is who we're looking at, or?
I'm sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
I just was thinking timeline-wise, what you might.
So the timeline for the project is to invest most of 2026 in community outreach and fundraising. That the actual installation of the park would not be until late summer of 2027. That's a really rough timeline. But to address your question, I think that we need to have several different things in place. One of them is a core group of volunteers who we recruit to assist in the maintenance of the park. That may be sort of the first wave, i.e. the park's open, there's a lot of energy, a lot of interest and stuff like that, and we have some volunteers. But I think that in addition to that, we have to have maybe a bridge kind of scenario whereby we ensure that if the volunteer core group is not able to maintain a very high level of maintenance for the park, that we do have private contracting services that are built into the plan for, and then obviously, if we're very successful more long-term and we're doing other streetscape projects, maybe it's warranted to have a part-time person from the Department of Public Works. So I don't know what Paul and Greg think about that, but I was just thinking about having more than one kind of layer in terms of maintenance, but not having the volunteer group be sort of the structural support for those layers, if that makes sense. Oh, why don't you come to the front? Thanks, Bob. Introduce yourself, please. I'll turn the mic on.
I'm Bob Bowers, resident of New London. I have to confess, I was a little concerned that you might be biting off more than the selectmen would be willing to accept, but listening to your planning on this, it makes some sense. But when I started talking with people about a similar concept, it became apparent to me that the selectmen would not want to put any money into it, probably. They would not want to have Sam have problems maintaining it, so I'm very glad to hear that you're going down that path. So if the plan goes along with the way you're going, this could be a very good thing. I'm very supportive and hopeful for it. The question I had earlier on, and I don't know the answer to, is ADA accessibility, and maybe you're familiar with that, but I poked at it, and the first poke from my good friend AI told me, yes, it's has to be ADA compliant, but I know there are exceptions, such as going through the playground. Maybe there are exceptions that say if it's a gravel path. I mean, a lot of communities have just sort of gravel paths, but I raise that as a question that you address as you go through it. And I think one other thing, I did undertake to have a very minor conversation with the Garden Club and Tracy Garden, and they were very much in favor of something, but not in favor of spending any of their money or having their people do the work, because they felt very stressed on what they had to do. Now, that could change over time. If you do something really nice, you could easily get people starting to volunteer for the Garden Club just to be part of it. So
Thank you.
it has its layers. So the ADA question is really the one thing that I worry about.
Thanks for the comments. Yeah, our intent would be for this to be fully ADA compliant. The topic of, gravel walkways was, we talked about that briefly with Sam, and it was kind of determined that gravel is, it's probably the most inexpensive up front. It does require a lot of maintenance, whereas, some other harder surfaces might actually be less. So, final materials, I think, at this point are still to be determined, but, the goal would be, ADA compliant, hard surfaces for, all the users. And as far as the kind of maintenance issues in general, Russ, I think you're on point with taking the multi-layered approach. I do think raising that maintenance fund up front would go a long way, in kind of easing the tensions, or easing worries, I guess, about the long-term maintenance. But yeah, I think,
I think the question behind the question is, it's hard for me to envision this scenario, but let's say the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee no longer convenes, and, some of the some of the activists in this group, aren't able to take any level of responsibility for the wonderful thing that we've created. I think the concern is that objectively, since it's municipal property, then the town is going to be responsible for it, no matter what sort of direction future volunteer groups take or advisory groups take. It's hard to sort of reassure the Board of Selectmen that there isn't any possible scenario where the Department of Public Works wouldn't take some level of responsibility. I mean, I certainly don't feel like that is a viable position, but I did incorporate into the materials that I provided to the Board of Selectmen that we would have a maintenance fund initially as an integral part of the fundraising. As far as the ADA issue goes, one of the things Sam recommended was that when we have a design plan that we plan to move forward with, is that we meet with him and the ADA compliance officer for New Hampshire DOT, who actually lives in Wilmot. But initially, we did get some feedback from Sam in terms of the elevations of the sidewalk. There will be hopefully the renovated sidewalk in front of the park to make sure the elevations are consistent with ADA guidelines, and also the elevation from the parking lot, the municipal parking lot, to the park is actually pretty steep, and that he suggests that we not make any entryways on Pleasant Street because you'd have to have a ramp that's unworkable in terms of its length in order to meet ADA compliance. So we've gotten some very informal feedback from Sam on that, but I think it is something that we want to be vigilant about because obviously we have a lot of seniors in town. We have people who have, people of any age who have physical challenges. So our intent is to have it as a welcoming space and an accessible space.
Russ, I like the idea of the, really nice ornamental plantings and things like that. My thought, though, was, if we were to scale that back maybe a little bit, then the park might be more welcoming to people if they were, wanted to volunteer to maintain it, because then they don't have to have this very high level of landscaping professionalism. Because what I was thinking was, we could put a sign up and it could be like, the state of New Hampshire doesn't adopt a highway where businesses, have their name on the highway and, it's a reflection of their business. We could do, a monthly thing with the park where we could say, this month the park is maintained by the Outing Club, or this month the park is maintained by, the New London Inn, or, interested parties, and they could also have, a QR code for donations to that organization. So it's twofold. They're doing something for the community and doing the maintenance, but then also they can see the reward from donations in town as an appreciation for the maintenance of the park. So that could be an answer. The Boy Scouts could have a month. I was thinking we probably have like 7 months or so throughout the year where we're going to maintain the park if we're going to keep it closed during the winter. So I would think that we could find, 7 organizations in town that would be willing to maintain it. I know Colby Sawyer needs community service hours for a lot of their different majors. Their sports teams all need community service hours. The elementary school, the middle school, any of the Kearsarge schools, I'm sure could pick a day and do that. So maybe, I like the idea of the very ornamental, very high-end landscaping, but if we maybe took it down a notch so that it's more manageable for your average laborer, maybe that would be a more easy option to find help and labor and support to maintain it.
I really like your idea of, businesses sponsoring the maintenance of the park, and then getting some kind of recognition for that. That makes a lot of sense. I think that there's a real design challenge here, which Greg and Paul have tried to address, but we're using a relatively small space and trying to have sort of really defined micro environments within the space, kind of for different uses. And I think there is a necessity for privacy screening to sort of really define those different spaces. I mean, obviously, in terms of plant selection, and I'm getting beyond my expertise here, but there are plant choices that require less pruning or less maintenance kind of thing. So, yeah, right. So, again, I would defer to the experts on this, but I appreciate what you're saying, which is we might need a landscape plan that does not require a horticulturalist to maintain it, you know. I mean, there's certain people in the garden club who are extremely knowledgeable about these things, but I don't know if you folks have a comment on that.
Yeah, I think the approach we would take in any type of planting design would be to have, you know, easy to maintain, resilient plants, preferably native, you know, stuff that doesn't need to be irrigated or, you know, yeah, frequently pruned. Preferably stuff that, you know, doesn't have a lot of, say, like, fruits or nuts or cones and stuff like that that, you know, require, you know, that extra level of effort to keep clean. So I think that's achievable. And just because I think we say ornamental plantings, I don't think ornamental necessarily means complex or complicated.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add one thing regarding the accessibility and ADA laws or regulations. We'd have to make sure also signage and the information, there's rules about font size and approachability to those that we'd have to follow, so it's not just mobility around the site. So that was one thing we can look at.
I appreciate the thoughtfulness that people are conveying about the project this evening. And there are going to be many more opportunities for input. At our February meeting, I was going to suggest that we review kind of a schedule for community outreach and fundraising for the project, obviously contingent on what the Board of Selectmen decide on the 18th. You know, I think that we want to be realistic, i.e. they may decide that they want a further level of detail or more explicit kind of commitments around the maintenance plan before they approve it. I don't know if that's the direction things will be going in, but I think that it is fair to say that the town officials I've spoken to individually are very positive about the project and have been extremely helpful in terms of providing timely and useful input into the project so far. So I think that's something we'll want to address in our February meeting, is really how we can make this a public dialogue, an engaging public dialogue, really think through all the stakeholders in the community and how we're going to engage them, and you know, hopefully continue the momentum that's already been created. I mean, we sort of crystallized an idea, but obviously we have to create public interest and momentum to bring the project forward to fruition. We have any other comments about? Oh, Bob.
I'm still Bob Bowers. This is just a question. Do you have any idea how much money you would need in that kind of a maintenance fund?
I'm not in a position to speculate. I was previously just gave the random example of a $15,000 maintenance fund, but I'm not sure that that would really suffice. And I don't know if Greg and Paul want to. We haven't really gotten cost estimate projections on the park itself.
Yeah.
And I bet there is some kind of formula about, if the park has this much acreage and it has this high definition of sort of
Well,
structures and landscaping, then maybe that's a way to get at the number, but
I imagine you can't have it by, is the 18th coming up that you were going to meet with the selectmen?
yes, and they have not requested, nor are we in a
Yeah,
position to say that we have a maintenance fund that is, they're gonna raise a maintenance fund of X amount.
Yeah.
And it'll last, and that maintenance fund will take care of the park for 7 years. I don't have that plan.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, I don't, likewise, I don't think I'm in a position to say it costs a certain amount of money. I do think that establishing some type of like more significant fund that can actually grow money through like interest or something along those lines could be a great way to to raise money annually for it. Whether we can get a big enough ball like that rolling, I don't know, but I think it's something that we should probably explore.
It strikes me that at some point to convince, I'm worried about convincing the selectmen. I did hear a comment from Selectman Kidder that made me concerned that she was not in favor of this, and that I may have misinterpreted that. But I think one of the things is the cost structure. So seems to me possible to maybe reach out to landscapers and say, what if you had a contract every year to do a park that looked like this? What's your rough idea? And then to do a calculation that says to produce that amount every year, you're going to need a trust fund of X $1,000, so that you at least, it's the start point in trying to get the yes, say, we understand we need to have a fund of $50,000 in order to produce $4,000 a year, and we are told that it's likely to cost $3,000 a year, so we should have enough to do this. And if you want to make it contingent on having that fund, you may, not telling you, but sometimes saying, make it contingent on having that fund before you sign the dotted line. I think they're very worried about money. I think they're very worried about maintenance. And you've mentioned those, and and I'm very pleased to hear Sam participating in this and offering thoughts and ideas, because that's very supportive. But just a thought.
Yeah, those are excellent points, for sure.
Russ, I think seeing final sketches, diagrams of what we all envision as a wonderful public park for multiple uses, we're somewhat losing sight of the fact that this is going to be a project over time, gradually evolving, starting small and doing things well, rather than pushing, compromised by a lack of funds, and not ending up with a project that is appealing from the start or possibly failing and not getting completed. So I think our emphasis in presentation to the select board and the town is we have this vision, but the timeline and the finances are yet to be defined. This is what we'd like to accomplish. Again, this is what we think the ultimate costs are going to be, and certainly seeking out maintenance costs once we see what the final project is going to look like should be obtainable. I mean, even Sam had the vision of, well, look, the town of Lebanon has someone full-time to maintain the parks, and he has that vision ultimately for this town of providing services within this space for filling water bottles, public restrooms, waste facilities that are going to have to be tended to. And so he sees something evolving over time where, yes, his department might be able to add another position to look after not only this space, but other public spaces in the town. But I don't think we should present this as happening within 6 months, both the financing and the construction to the end point. It's a process in evolution. We want to do it right, start slowly, do it correctly, and ultimately get to this beautiful end point.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, I think that my rationale, which I think everyone should, should scrutinize. My rationale is that I wanted to get some very preliminary nod from the Board of Selectmen that they're open to the idea of using this space as a pocket park, and that we would need to come back to them with a more detailed plan with cost projections and with, as Bob mentioned, a really explicit kind of maintenance plan for their final approval. What I was trying to guard against is that our committee spending like 6 months a year on the pocket park plan and then for them to say that the Board of Selectmen do not agree that this parcel could be used for a pocket park, if you understand what I'm saying. So I was just trying to get some preliminary nod from them that this was a worthwhile endeavor, that they would seriously considering approval with another level of detail. So, but I know that Greg and Paul have some time constraints this evening, and I wanted to thank them for their time and very much appreciate their expertise and their receptivity to engaging our community in the project.
Thanks, and looking forward to continuing the process with you guys and making this happen.
Appreciate it very much. So I know several of our committee members have other engagements this evening, so I'm going to keep our meeting intentionally brief. So I did want to just move ahead and talk a little bit about the benchmarks for the project, just rough benchmarks. So as I stated previously, we in 2026 we will be developing some vehicles for community engagement, including forums for participation in terms of further discussion on the project. We have already had a very positive meeting with the planning board, and I would say that although there was no formal vote, that the planning board was receptive to the basic concept of creating a pocket park at this location. Obviously, we need a much more detailed plan in terms of how to engage the public and develop some momentum around approval of the plan. There are a lot of different vehicles that are available for public engagement, some really creative and inventive things like having interactive diagrams on the website where people can make comments or make alterations or things like that, and we'll be exploring those. I mean, there have been many successful community outreach efforts in terms of communities establishing pocket parks. Mike Ryan shared some of that at the neighbors meeting in terms of things that were brought to fruition in Chicago in terms of neighborhoods, and that was interesting to hear about. So we've got a lot of models to draw from, both rural communities, suburban communities, urban communities. And one of the things that Paul brought to my attention previously was the Pocket Park Toolkit, I think, and I don't remember what organization that was developed by, but something, again, I'll share with the committee. It really is like a roadmap from the idea to the implementation of the project. And I think that, Paul, you can add something if you wish, but I think that that toolkit is probably a great primer for us in terms of further developing this.
Yeah, that, I think that was from the Trust for Public Land. So there are a lot of organizations that have already gone down this road, so be useful to use the tools they have, at least for ideas. So that's something we can review as well.
And we will be having ongoing conversations with the Department of Public Works, with the Recreation Department, with the Conservation Commission, with the newly created Kearsarge Trails Coalition, or the New England Mountain Bike Association Kearsarge chapter, whatever your organizational form is, so that our planning in terms of the Pocket Park, but also other initiatives, hopefully will be well coordinated. So is there any other questions or concerns about the Pocket Park proposal at this time? If not, I think we'll shift to sidewalk repair and construction. I know that Sam is continuing the planning for sidewalk construction and repair. I believe that the model sidewalk, if I could refer to in front of the college, is going to be completed in the spring, and that will be extended from Colby Sawyer entrance to the Catholic Church. I believe, and Bob, you probably have some information about this, but I believe that there's been dialogue and discussion about actually repairing or replacing some of the sidewalks on the further end of Main Street, where there's quite a bit of deterioration, I think would be the polite word, particularly in sort of the barn, playhouse, Spring Ledge Farm area. So I believe that's an area that's going to be a priority next summer. But if there is a capital budget that you can review, that's online, that's on the website, where he lays out like the multi-year plan for the sidewalks. But we'll continue to work with him on that. The only other item I had on the agenda was the multi-purpose trail update, and maybe you could share with us dialogue and discussion you've had since our last meeting and sort of what, the progress you've made in terms of forming the organization. So I'll turn it over to Grant.
Yeah, sure. So we did finalize our NEMBA chapter. We are officially Kearsarge NEMBA, which is huge for us. We have a nonprofit status and insurance for trail workers, which is huge. We have spoken with, we had another public meeting where we had about almost 60 people from the public come and hear about our trails vision and mission. Since then, we had spoken about the hub and spoke model. One of the landowners that the Lionbrook Trail traverses, their properties had some concerns, I guess, about maybe the scope of the project. I haven't spoken with her directly, but I need to so that we can get approvals from her. We have since secured, the paperwork isn't signed yet, but 192 acres in Newberry where we'll be building trails. There are 8 miles of trails already, and we're going to be improving those and building a lot more. We are working in the town of Sunapee right now. The town has 25 acres, which is part of Tilton Park, which is going to vote very soon on a NEMBA project there, our NEMBA project there. We also have a project which we're working on with the State Parks Department, building a a trail from the top to bottom on Mount Kearsarge. So it would be on the back side, the Warner side, where you can drive up, and then you'd be able to ride your bike all the way down from the top to bottom. So we are very busy.
So who owns the land in Newbury now? Is that town-owned land?
It is not. It's a private family, and they are ready to go. We just have to finalize our MOU with them, which hopefully will happen this week or next week. And we'll be building there in the spring. And they have very graciously offered, they have a gravel pit on site, so we'll have access to that. They also have a wood mill on site, so we can make wooden features with their mill. It's a very attractive partnership to us because their neighbors have, I think, like 160 acres and 200-something acres. So there's a very large parcel of land that we will ultimately probably have access to there. So it'll be a destination location more than like an interconnected location with the town, which is what we still envision for New London. Right now, we've just been inundated with opportunity, so we're kind of going after the low-hanging fruit, if you will, and seizing these opportunities and hoping to still do some work in New London. But our hub and spoke model for New London would certainly be an interconnected multi-use bike trail, which would connect a lot of the businesses in town, and many points of interest in town. The college, the hospital, the outing club location, the elementary school, Spring Ledge Farm, and we've gotten, preliminary approvals from all of those. We just need to finalize our map, so that's where we're at.
Sounds like you're making outstanding progress, so congratulations to you.
My board accuses me of going too fast. They are trying to keep up with the projects I present to them, so.
It's a good problem to have. Any comments on Grant's remarks? I mean, obviously, we're envisioning the same thing for New London, which is a robust network of walking and biking trails. And in a conversation I had with Ashley Seabold about a bicycle and pedestrian master plan for our town, she was basically saying, the master plan is going to be revisited, I think, in the next year or two. And that would be really the opportunity for us to do that kind of more broad sweep kind of planning, which I think would really create a great framework for the work of our committee and for the town.
I've been working with Osmond Sargent a lot lately also. And the Oler property, they're coming up with a management plan for that. And it sounds like bikes will be part of that. We haven't had the green light on that, but there wasn't any initial doubt, I guess, that they would ever be part of the conversation. So we're waiting to get confirmation on that, but hoping that can be part of our program too.
Yeah, the Land Trust is doing fundraising for that parcel right now, and that's contiguous to Messer Farm. So it's basically, Messer Farm is like 230 acres of conservation land, and the Oler property is like 180. So that creates an incredible natural preserve very close to town, and also is incredibly valuable for wildlife to have contiguous conservation areas. So anyway, that's all good news, yeah. Is there any other business to be conducted this evening? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. And a second. Thank you very much, everyone.